I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for spending your snowy day with us, and welcome to the DC History Center. My name's Autumn Calican, and I'm the Senior Manager of Collections here at the DC History Center. For those of you who don't know us, we are a community-driven nonprofit founded in 1894. The DC History Center collects local history from Washington, D.C. in order to deeper understanding of our city's past, to connect, empower, and inspire. We're in the third floor collection space right now, but the real work that we do is at the Carnegie Library in historic Mount Vernon Square. Washington, D.C.'s history is lush, unique, and so important to understanding our city's past. And you can learn about that here at the Carnegie by coming in, or you can find us online at dchistorycenter.org or on socials. As I mentioned, we'll be seeing a lot of exciting, interesting, and colorful characters today. If you find yourself interested in learning more about those, I will be providing a document at the end of this program, and you will be able to come in and see some of the projects that we're working on and also find some digitized pieces online. Let me explain to you how this is going to go today. So first, we're going to take a walk through the collection space and maybe meet some DC history characters of our own. We'll hear what the people are working on, and we'll be able to see some of those collections a little bit later. Afterwards, I'm going to give you some research tips and tricks, and then we'll close out with the Q&A. But before we do that, I have some production notes that I have to tell you. All right, Zoom housekeeping. A couple things that you should know. We've enabled Zoom's automatic transcription on this program, so you can turn on the captions at the bottom of your screen. We're sharing resources, but this program is also a chance to learn from each other, so please use the Q&A to chat with your fellow attendees, ask questions you'd like to see me answer at the end. You can like and respond to messages, and then just so you know, the chat channel is restricted, and it's just so we can put all of the resources in one place. The resources and collections we talk about are going to be conveniently located in that document that I told you about. We'll make sure that you get that at the end of the day. We're recording today's program, and we hope to make parts of it publicly available. So let's get our conversation going. In the Q&A, share some of your research wins and woes and where you're turning in from today. That's it. Let's get started. Follow me. This is our third floor collection space, and it's one of 4 collection spaces in the DC History Center. We're not giants. The ceilings are just a little low. Oh, Philip, hey, how are you doing today? Great. This is Philip Warfield. He is our former education intern and current PhD candidate in public history at Howard University. Philip, why don't you tell us a little bit about your working on today?
Yeah, today I'm checking out the story of Clifford Kennedy Berryman. He was a cartoonist. In fact, he won some Pulitzer Prize award actually for his work. So he covered everything surrounding politics at the time, but including the life of Teddy Roosevelt and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, all these different groups of people. In fact, you can check this out, if you will. Look at all of this. These are original drawings of his. Look at just the details, the hands. We've got some other things on hands that you're going to see here pretty soon. He worked on so many different things. He worked for the Washington Post, the Washington Star, all kinds of things. I've been really checking out a lot of his personal work here at the DC History.
And he satirized both Republicans and Democrats, right?
Exactly. So both Republicans and Democrats kind of have this love and hate respect for him and his work. Some of them even wanted some of his things like put on their own personal walls. It's crazy.
And we have those letters in the DC History collection, actually. The DC History Center holds Clifford Berryman's personal papers, and you'll be able to see them a little bit later. But yeah, there are some letters from politicians begging him for the original copies of these cartoons so that they can hang them in their office, even if they were a little funny, even if they were making fun of them a little bit. I know that you said earlier to me that Clifford Berryman came from a family of cartoonists, right?
He sure did. So his son actually became a cartoonist himself. And in fact, they're the only 2 people in Pulitzer Prize history to win in the same exact category, in the same family. And I think also that maybe a grandfather was involved in this cartoonist legacy.
Yeah, it's his father. So Clifford Berryman was from Kentucky. And his father was actually locally known in a much smaller capacity for drawing little cartoons of the local characters in his own community. So it's like a family legacy, this cartooning. These collections are really incredible. What I love about them the most is that they're deeply personal. There are letters, there are
Diaries.
yes, there's diaries. There's also table settings, and he was a part of the Gridiron Club, which is a club for newspapermen in Washington, D.C., and he was actually the president of it, and he was the first cartoonist who was a president of the Gridiron Club.
Definitely.
Yeah, can't wait to show you some of these collections later. Philip,
Zero.
follow me this way. I think we've got another person in the staff waiting for us. Oh, Mariana, hey. Hi. This is Mariana. She is our manager of community engagement at the DC History Center. Mariana, what are you taking a look at right now?
I'm actually looking at Bessie Robinson's After Hours Club in the folder that we have on her. Interestingly, most of her folder is made up of photographs, which gives us a good insight into cultural life, community formation. But there's also these interesting couple of pieces of paper that are very interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to look more at those later. So when you've been looking through this collection, what really stuck out to you about Bessie?
It's really interesting because Bessie seems to be one of those community pillars that is involved in civil life. Something about the after hours clubs, which are interesting, is that after hours clubs were membership organizations that were essentially ways for people of skirting around liquor laws. So this after hours club, for example, would have had members who joined it and folks come in for community building, but ultimately it's really a social affair that folks are having. And you see it in the photographs that are here. And it's really interesting as well to think about the ways in which Bessie Robinson's After Hours Club in particular was in the heart of U Street. And so this is in the 1940s through the 1960s, where U Street really U Street as a whole served as a safe space, but this membership organization would have been like a kind of microcosm of that, where Black folks were coming together to just be themselves and be around community. And I think that that's really beautiful. So what I've been taking away from these photographs is just looking at those little details of community bonding, the personalities that are coming through. And what's also interesting about photographs is that they can give you insights into other things to look at, even if in themselves, like they don't have the information that you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot wait to learn more about Bessie Robinson's After Hours Club, and we'll take a look at those collections a little bit later. I think we've got one more. Now you might see we're in this collection space. We've got these movable shelves. We have these boxes down here, and I think there's someone here, but let's just... I'm just kidding. This is Alex Aspiazu, our librarian, being very librarian-like.
Oh, hello. I am here reading this biography called Father Struck It Rich by Evelyn McLean Walsh McLean. And let me tell you why I became obsessed with her. So last fall, I was doing research for my spooky DC blog, which you should go look at. And one of the articles I was reading was saying that the Octagon House, which is on Massachusetts Ave, is the most haunted house in DC. And one of the ghosts that famously resides there walks the halls in the nude. And I was like, I must know who this is, this scandalous person. And it turns out it is reputed to be the ghost of this woman, Evelyn, whose life is amazing. She is truly ungovernable, and I am such a fan. So, and we have her photo collections in our archives, which we'll show you later. But essentially, she was the daughter of an Irish immigrant who literally struck it rich in a mine in the West. And back then, rich people it was the fashion to come to Washington, D.C. and build these huge, grand, wonderful houses. And then as an elder teenager, she marries the heir of the Washington Post. And against all of everyone's better judgment and advice, they get $200,000 at the time in pin money for their anniversary, for their honeymoon, which means basically go spend it. In today's dollars, that would be $6.6 million. And by the time they came back from their honeymoon, they had spent it all. They didn't even have money to pay for their hotel Another biographer said that the young couple had more money than sense. And they went to Paris, they met Cartier, who was this amazing salesman, and he made up this crazy story about this diamond, about how it had been stolen from a temple in India, and the man who found it got torn apart by dogs, and then Marie Antoinette wore it and got her head cut off. And of course, all of this was invented. There's no record of any of this. But Evelyn was hooked. She fell in love. She was like, I will buy this diamond. And it was the Hope Diamond, which of course now is American patrimony. We have it here in DC. But one of the reasons that people thought it might be haunted is that there might be curses, that it actually phosphoresces red. So if you put ultraviolet light on it, and it'll glow in the dark for several seconds, this blood red. It is gorgeous. 54 karat diamond, beautiful, amazing. And so she wore it everywhere. We will see pictures of it. It is hilarious. I cannot wait. I love her. She's awesome. So see you over there.
All right, it is almost time for us to head to the collections camp. If you follow me this way to our station. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Don't mind me. I'm just going to put my jacket on here. All right, moving on to the next section. It's our collections cam. Those of you who came to my collections orientation last year might remember how this works. And we are going to be able to take a look at some of the collections that I was talking to you earlier about. So I would first like to welcome back Alex so that we can talk about Evelyn and give you sort of a look into her life.
Hi, everyone. Whether the Hope Diamond is cursed or not is a question that lots of people have asked, and she certainly had a very difficult life. So it's up to you to judge. But she was also very fabulous, and she loved to wear all of her jewels. And we love this picture here because, for one, I thought this was a fur coat. It is not. It is, you could see the tiny little eyes. Those are two little dogs. And she is wearing both her Hope Diamond right there in the middle and her Star of the East.
Yes, so she was a woman of many luxuries, as we'll see later, and she was also quite eccentric.
Yeah, she was. She was a lot of fun. So she would throw these big parties for the soldiers that were coming back from the war. And
you know, and I think we have an illustration of that actually.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I pulled this from the collection. It is a copy, so it's a little shiny. I'm going to hold it up. There we go. So this is an illustration of Evelyn hosting a party for World War II soldiers. And what I loved about this is by an artist named Leo Hirschfield, not the creator of the Tootsie Roll, also named Leo Hirschfield, but this artist's work might look familiar to you, and it is because he is the father of modern court illustration. So if you've ever seen, I don't know, an illustration from a court or a celebrity illustration from a court, they are using what is essentially his style. And so if you're thinking about that in mind, you can kind of look at this and feel the way that she is presiding over this kind of community. And it sort of feels like a courtroom a little bit. But yeah, I thought that was so incredible. She had a lot of famous contacts.
She did. All of the pictures are senators and ambassadors. And so I really wanted to show you pictures of Evelyn she's older here in action at a party, because she loved to wear her Hope Diamond everywhere, and moreover treated it like a baseball, essentially. She loved to show it off, so you can see her talking with friends, and she's just removed it and they're trying it on, they're looking at it. She would typically hide her jewels in her couch cushions or in her toaster. She liked to take it to the World War II hospitals so that soldiers could play catch with it.
What?
Yeah. And she also liked, she had a Great Dane, and she had a collar where she could put the Hope Diamond on the Great Dane. So
this is the Hope Diamond.
Yes.
Can you imagine playing catch with the Hope Diamond? Hope Diamond on a dog. Here she is with her classic cigarette entertaining at, I think, the same party as the other picture. All right, let's see what else we have here.
Actually, it's a different party. She wears this, it's different
Oh, it's a
dresses.
different party.
Yeah,
Okay.
she wears the whole setup to everything. If you've got it, flaunt it.
And if you've got it flaunted, here's actually a younger picture of Evelyn. Again, I'm going to hold it up against the glare. And she not only has the diamond that we know and love, but a tiara as well in this one.
Yep, sure does.
Yeah, it is a type of sort of eccentric glamour that's hard to imagine nowadays, especially spending, is it $6.8 million on your honeymoon?
So true. Yeah,
And do we have a picture from that honeymoon?
we sure
I
do.
think we do. All right, take a look at this.
Okay, so as you can see, they're crossing the desert. This is the Middle East, and they're using not only horses, which is not the recommended full animal for the desert, but look at their retinue of all of these people that they hired to protect them. No wonder their honeymoon trip lasted so long. And there's a beautiful picture of them on camels, but it's in a slide, so you're gonna have to come look at it yourself. So make an appointment at the library so you can view it.
So this is how it is with the Clifford collection as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But sometimes people have such an outsized footprint that they sort of expand beyond their own collection. So we have the Evelyn McLean Walsh collection here, but we also have the collections of a woman named Nanny Chase. Nanny Chase was many things, and one of the things that she was Evelyn McLean's social secretary. And so she had, at the end of her life, and so she had notebooks with her social engagements. She has some letters from people remembering Evelyn, and she also has her estate booklets. And so these are booklets that went to auction, and it is everything, and there are two of them, but I'm just going to show you one. It is everything that Evelyn Walsh McLean owned at this time. It's her estate on her house, which is called Friendship House. And honestly, I'm just going to open it up to a random page and see what we can see. 4 assorted feather and fur coverlets.
Look at all the parasols. There
is a whole section of this because this was an auction booklet. They're sort of organized into lots. And so there is an entire section of this that is animal themed. So these are all of the animal figurines and animal necklaces. I haven't shown Alex, she's seeing this for the first time. Terracotta poodle figure. Decorated porcelain cow figures.
So many little porcelain pugs.
Yeah, polar bears. I mean, and what we've seen is that she loves dogs, right? And she was a decorated figure of a rooster. And these are the things where I could look at this all day to really understand anywhere that $6.8 million went. But also just sort of like the extent of a bizarre wealth like this. And I think what interests me the most about it is the way that Evelyn, how casual she was with it, like the way she shared it with people, and she's taken off the necklace and just kind of holding it out. She's playing catch with it. There is just, it's a very interesting way of existing in this sort of upper set. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is just incredible. Well, Alex, thank you so much.
Oh,
thank you for telling us about Evelyn. Before you leave, is there anything we missed? Is there anything?
No, I mean,
last minute things about Evelyn.
I think that she, you know, I like your perspective on it. I love these journals. I'm going to look at them. I just think that she did what she wanted. She lived her life the way she wanted, and that is why I admire her, and I think she's great.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of people who lived their life the way they wanted, Mariana. No, I'm just kidding. Bethy Robinson. Come on, Mariana. So this is a little bit of a different collection because this collection is more community based. But I would say that something that Evelyn and Bessie have in common actually is that they built a space where they entertained people.
Yes, 100%.
And so let's get in here. The first thing I would love to talk about is just give you an idea of Bessie Robinson and what she looked like. Perfect spotlight. Here she is.
I mean, just gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Personality
Glamorous.
on 10.
Absolutely a personality shot. And there are a couple pictures of her in this. This collection is really interesting because it's a relatively small collection, but it has a lot of content. Its materials span 1930s through the 1960s. And a lot of the photographs in it actually came directly out of scrapbooks. So since they've been removed from the scrapbook, And if you came to my collections orientation last year, you knew that I was harping on making sure that you date and name your photos. Please say who's in those photos, because even these pictures of Bessie Robinson are not always labeled. We were able to find her in other photographs because we learned what she looked like from the ones that were. And there are a lot of unlabeled photographs in here, quite frankly. But yeah, it's a beautiful collection. What we also have is we do have some objects from this collection from the club itself. We don't have them on site. I cannot show them to you, but you can imagine them.
I also think it's really interesting to look at, and Autumn is pulling it out, is that not only was she kind of a space maker, but she was also very involved in civil society. As you can tell, she was part of the Granddaughters of the Elk.
What's that?
It is a civil society organization for Black women. And from what I gathered, her chapter was based in Saratoga, New York, or maybe Staten Island.
Staten Island,
Yeah.
Yes, and so this is when she received her commission for the Granddaughters of the Elks. And this is from the granddaughter ruler, who is the highest up in the organization, but there are also kind of satellite chapters, and she actually moved up to become daughter ruler of her own chapter. So she was a leader both in her community, both in the sort of like nightlife entertainment scene, but also in this women-based organization. And we actually have a picture of all of them as well, which I'll show you.
It's really beautiful, and you can see some of the pendants that they wore. Yeah, and I think too, it's really reflective of the time, you know, mid 20th century, when civil society organizations were really a way to make community that I feel like we don't see anymore. And a lot of that is reflective in the photographs that we have of Bessie. And I also think it's really special that we have photographs from inside the club, the After Hours Club, because so much of the history of Black Broadway and that rich cultural phenomenon that is U Street has gone unrecorded, or doesn't exist in a lot of formal archives. And so these two photographs, for example, are from inside the club, and we can see kind of the environment and atmosphere that was available at the After Hours Club.
Yes. Ooh, I've got another one here too. I'll hold up to the camera. Lots of pictures from behind the bar. Jovial. Bessie Robinson is frequently in these photographs herself.
Kind of like a ringleader.
Yes. Gorgeous. And these are, again, one of those situations in which I wish that we knew everyone who was in this photograph. But we don't. But we do have a date, which is excellent. It is December 27th, 1949. And so the great thing about after hours clubs is that, first of all, Mariana made this joke to me earlier, DC happy hour culture, starting early and extending late, because they were after hours clubs and they were membership only. They were able to sort of skirt those liquor laws, and they were able to get in some amazing talent. And the people who visited Bessie's After Hours Club loved her so much that they left photographs, generally signed photographs of them and their bands. So we have a couple of these, and I've highlighted a few. This is Billy Hicks and his Sizzlin' Six. And this is actually when they were playing at St. Regis Hotel. Billy Hicks and his Sizzlin' Six were actually one of the first bands to integrate the sort of high-end hotel scene in New York City. And when you get the document that I created of all of these resources, I also found a song of theirs that has been digitized on archive.org, so you can listen to them and you can kind of get the vibe. And I've actually got another one for you as well. I'll hold this one up because it's small. There we go. This is Al Casey from the Al Casey Trio. Similar situation. He was a pianist. They were a trio sometimes and a quartet other times. And I actually have a full album digitized on YouTube that I have linked in our document. And I listened to it while I was doing this research, and it really like set the vibe. We've got one more photo here. What can you tell us about this?
So this is part of the reason that I wanted to include this one is because this is actually from a series of photographs in Saratoga, and shows, I believe, Bessie had family, an aunt, from what I gathered in the photographs, that lived in Saratoga. And it was just really important to me to both show kind of the ways in which people were always connected to family outside of Washington, D.C. And her sister joined her on a lot of these trips. And I included the one of who I believe is her family member kind of feeding some chickens that they had, but they had some really wonderful kind of staged photographs by water fountains. Like these were it girls going on trips. And I also wanted to highlight too the ways in which kind of the access to class that was in Washington, D.C. and the ways in which like Black folks in Washington, D.C. were vacationing. They were having, again, membership, civil society organizations. And it's really evident in this collection and the ways in which Bessie was an it girl within it.
Absolutely. And yeah, we'll hold that thought on vacations because I'll have a little bit to say about that later. Excellent. Well, Mariana, thank you so much for bringing Bessie to us. I try to imagine what it must have been like to have that scene and to have that type of space, especially during a time in which, you know, membership only allows you to sort of spend those late nights with together and with your community.
For sure. Be a safe space. Thank you, Bugs.
Thank you. All right. Closing out. Philip.
Hey, everybody.
Philip's back. He's slightly taller than the camera, so we're adjusting. But it's time to get back in the Clifford Berryman collection.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. And so to start out, our collection has a lot of portraits of Clifford Berryman. He was a photogenic guy. He took a lot of portraits. And so Philip chose one for us to look at.
Yeah.
What did you like about this one?
I love this. This is Clifford Berryman, maybe towards the end of his life. He's holding up this photo of Uncle Sam. So if you look closely, you can see well, not the red, white, and blue, but you can see the stars all over Uncle Sam here. One of his, famous renditions of the pretty famous Uncle Sam character. We don't know when this picture exactly was, but this is between maybe 1930, 1945 or so. And this is him before he even wins his Pulitzer Prize. So clearly he still had more work to do.
We have a lot to look at, so I'm not going to show you a ton of these, but like I said, many portraits. I mean, just
Whoa.
whoa, yeah.
I have no idea what's going on here, actually.
Me as well. Yeah, just this is an entire folder of Berryman portraits. I was thinking about this when you selected Berryman for your project. The first time that I came across his work was probably in high school in a textbook. His political cartoons are featured in a lot of kind of like classic McGill textbooks, and so his legacy really lives on in that way.
Definitely, definitely.
And one of the things that I love about our Clifford Berryman collection, like I said earlier, is that it is deeply personal. It has letters, it has diaries, but much like Evelyn, his presence sort of bleeds into other collections that we have. So we have this collection, it's called the Emma Louise Leon Memorabilia Collection. And in it, there are 10 individual cartoons that were made for a friend of Clifford Berryman, Washington Post editor and reporter. His name was Gideon Allen Leon Jr., the grandfather of the woman who donated this collection. There we go.
So for every single day on this trip, Clifford Berryman just writes it's like a cartoon for every little thing that he's going through that single day. So take a look at these. My dear Lion, however you want to pronounce it. These are to be taken according to directions. If so taken, you will find them very enjoyable. Yours for a very successful trip, C.K. Berryman. And also, I want to just highlight this real fast. You see that top portion right there, Studio C.K. Berryman, cartoonist. See that bear? That is the very famous teddy bear. Without Berryman, we wouldn't know, well, that teddy bears are what they are now. Essentially, the person who made teddy bears got super inspired by Berryman during the Teddy Roosevelt era and created this. So just a little side note. Second day out, but I hope not all in. So check this out. There's that bear character again, just going through his day, kind of tongue-in-cheek humor. And you'll find this just throughout this collection, something fun for like every single day.
And it was a boat trip.
Yeah, exactly.
So every day on the boat.
And even these fun, like third day's journey, like little cards that really remind you of like one of those scenes in maybe an old movie, an old Nickelodeon.
I like the way that he's reminding him of his job because he's away from work right now. So he's like, lest you forget, here's the Washington Star paper. Here's, these things are still happening while you are gone. Here's one that I really love here, but I think it's a later day. You know what this reminds me of actually? And because I have not ever seen them, I can't say this with certainty, but I know that Clifford Berryman's father was drawing these caricatures of the locals back home. And I'm wondering if this is sort of like speaking to that.
And in case you're wondering where that home is and where down home is, Berryman was born in Clinton, Kentucky in 1869. So 1869 Kentucky, these might be the sort of people that you just see around your neighborhood. And his father was heavily inspired by that. Looks like somebody was eating good.
Oh my gosh, also look at the Sunday Star, forget it.
Wow, yeah. Please take a vacation is what he seems to be saying.
And some of these are missing. So the Sixth Dance, I'm not sure that we have that one. I don't think we have every single one. And that's just because the person who saved these maybe didn't maintain them all. The one that I wanted to get to is in the back, which is, I think, the last day.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of Clifford Berryman himself. He drew himself. And he's waiting. And he's waiting for Leon to come home, and he has all of these ideas, but he's thrown them in the trash. And this sort of like pensive, but also very personal, like this was his friend and he missed him. And thinking about this collection, what I love about this in particular is sort of that feeling of you can see a Clifford Berryman cartoon in a textbook, but you're not going to see this because this is personal. This is something that he drew for just one person. And if they had donated it to us, no one ever would have seen it. And I think it really sort of adds this humanness to someone who is quite famous, Pulitzer Prize award winning in his field. I love that collection so much.
It's definitely way different from what you might find about Berryman across different archives. Sure, the National Archives has things of his, presidential libraries have his things, but the DC History Center has the more personal collections, like what Autumn is saying. And you're about to see something really, really personal.
So, the Clifford Berryman collection includes his correspondence and also the correspondence of his wife, Kate, who he referred to as Kit. They married, as Philip said, in 1890. This letter is from, 1893. This letter is from 1890, so it's 3 years before they married. It's clear that there is some flirtation happening, but it is unclear what their relationship is. So what happens, I'll give you a summary since I did read this entire thing. What happens here is that Kate is going on a long journey, and he planned to meet her at the depot, I think in Baltimore, but he was late, and so he was not able to see her off. So he wrote this letter apologizing for his lateness, but also asking if he's kind of doing these like little tongue-in-cheek things. It's clear that they know each other very well. One of the things says, "Of course you did not deliver my blank, parentheses, to Miss Birdie, as you refused to accept it. Guess I will have to carry it out on your advice and deliver my messages, etc. in person." I'm not sure who Miss Birdie is.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
3 years before their marriage, it's possible that he was courting someone else. One of the things that I love about this too is he makes this blot here, as you can see when he uses the words refuse. He's talking about another woman, and he says, "Please excuse the blot," and then draws a hand pointing to it. So you sort of see that Clifford Berryman kind of cartooning style, even in this casual letter. And Philip, you pointed out about the handwriting earlier, how beautiful it
Yes,
is.
gorgeous script. Look at how even perfectly this is. And cursive, we just don't teach these sorts of things anymore.
No,
That's
we
for
don't.
sure.
Here's the thing, they taught me that because they do teach you that in museum school because you're looking at this constantly. I had to take a test. But yeah, ever your sincere friend, Clifford. And you know, it's one of those things where it's hard to really understand how people were talking to each other during this time because they're very much sort of speaking between the lines. I just thought this was so beautiful. And at the end of this letter, he promises that he will be there at the Grand Union Depot when she returns. So he missed her on the way out, but he'll be there when she gets back.
So it looks like Kate and Berryman were married from about 1893 to Berryman's death in 1949. And what's really sad is something that I found was a diary. And that diary, I was looking through it, it was the Berryman papers, but it was in 1950. But if Berryman passed away in 1949, then whose handwriting was I reading? Autumn, you helped me figure out that part of the
I
story.
did, and I will say I don't have the library here with us because I did not pull it, but I took a look at it and I realized that Kate was the one writing in the diary, even though it has C.K. Berryman hand stamped on the cover, and she decided to use it because he couldn't. And you can really see she's kind of, it's a day-by-day diary, so she's sort of just like saying her daily life, and she misses him, and that's sort of clear in the pages. And this is, you know, sometimes there are sad things that you find in collections. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to show you before we move on, which is something that I love in this collection. This is a hand study that Berryman did. And if you have any interest in art, or if you're an artist yourself, you know that hands are really hard to draw. But also this type of work is sort of like typical for an artist that's working on something. And Berryman's drawings, and I can take a look through this folder and see if there's an example of this. Berryman's drawings frequently feature sort of strong hand movements because they are politicians. So if you look at this finger right here, it has kind of Uncle Sam energy. It has I want you energy. Backside too. Gorgeous.
And earlier, you may have noticed that in almost every single letter, anything that he's doing, there's always a well-defined hand. Who knows that maybe this is the first thing he even learned how to draw, and he just really perfected it because he wanted to do what he ended up
Or
doing.
the last thing that he learned to draw.
Exactly. Could be that as well. Don't skip out on your hands if you're an artist trying to grow. Maybe that's the lesson here.
He was doing holiday cards. On fishing. Yeah, it's just a really lush collection. There are 5 boxes here. So what we pulled is only one snippet of the kind of stuff that you can find in the Clifford Berryman collection. It's just absolutely lush, deeply personal, and I think worth looking at. All of these collections are.
It's worth noting that the Berryman collection and Berryman himself, as a Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist, he and his son, they now have an award. The Pulitzer Prize has an award for every single great cartoonist since about the 1980s. So his legacy lives on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I genuinely did not know it. Philip, thank you so much. And let's move on to the tips and tricks section.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, folks. Moving on to the next section, we are going to be going over a couple research tips and tricks for those of you who are interested in learning about the own characters in your life. Some of you may have used these before, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail for those who have not. So step 1, when you're researching a character, is first, I guess step 0 is to find out who that person is. And so I'm going to be doing a case study using a man named George Luther Sadgwar. He went by G. Luther. Now, George Luther Sadgwar was a cartoonist, he was a father, and he was an art teacher at Shaw. The Sadgwar family scrapbook it was the collections item that I started with. It is from the year 1923, and it is a part of the Sadgwar family papers collection here at the DC History Center. I wrote an article about this scrapbook in Washington History, spring 2023. And this is kind of part of my research project for looking at this. All right, so step 1, yourself. Once you've identified the person that you're researching, like I identified G. Luther Sadgwar, the first step is you. Is the person a relative? Were they known in your community? Are there people that you can talk to? Are there elders? Could you collect personal anecdotes about this person and maybe consider doing an oral history later? The thing that I like to start with is collections, honestly. And if you have the ability to do it, I would suggest maybe looking at the collection first sort of solo and seeing what you can glean from either the single object or however large the collection is. If it's a couple boxes, the Sadgwar collection is only about 2 boxes. And I learned as much as I could from that before doing further research because I wanted to sort of get an idea of Luther and the family from the materials that were theirs. Step 2, honestly, Google it. Simple search is really going to give you some good favors here. When you Google G. Luther Sadgwar, the first thing that comes up is an article that I wrote. So time travel with me to a time before I wrote this article when I was writing it. So when I was doing that, my process was very similar to what I'm describing here. A quick Google search of G. Luther Sadgwar reveals 2 things. In addition to being a cartoonist, he was also a playwright, which you can see on this newspaper article. This is from when he was in high school and at Dunbar. And it also revealed he died suddenly in 1923, which was actually the year that the scrapbook was made. So already having started at the scrapbook, I learned something that contextualized that object for me by doing this Google search. You'd be surprised by what you can find on Google, even if you believe the person that you're researching is not very well known. You can find personal family trees and websites. I once had somebody contact us to update one of our finding aids, which had a very long family tree, and it was because they were a member of that family. And so with their permission, I was able to get the website info for their personal family tree website and link it to the catalog record. And so small things like that, again, you would be surprised of the kind of, I guess, like commitment people have to their families, and finding those ins is really important. So the Sadgwar family came from North Carolina, like the Sadgwars as a whole have a line to North Carolina, and there's a lot of documentation on that, even if there's not a lot of documentation on the Sadgwars as they lived in Washington, D.C. Digging deeper. So next 2 steps. I love Ancestry.com, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Ancestry.com costs money. I don't want to pay for a subscription. Well, hopefully you don't have to. If you're a DC local and you have a DC public library card, you can use their Ancestry.com for free with your library card number. And if you're researching in-house at the DC History Center, you can use ours. If you're not a DC local, I encourage you to reach out to your public library and find out if they also provide this service, because it's really, really helpful. Ancestry.com allows you to access census records, marriage records, draft cards, sometimes digitized yearbooks. And sometimes, like I said earlier, you can find kind of a treasure trove if there's a zealous family member who's really put a lot of time into building that tree out. And yeah, it's a really rich resource. So Find a Grave is great. I would suggest doing Ancestry.com first, because in order to use Find a Grave properly, it is helpful to know either the year that your person is born or the year that they've died. If you know the cemetery location, if they're a relative to you, that's very helpful, but I will remind you that the city in which you are learning about this person's life might not always be where they are buried. For instance, G. Luther Sadgwar was buried at National Harmony Memorial Park in Hyattsville, close local, but not Washington, D.C., so I couldn't find it that way. Now, the robustness of these records kind of varies. Sometimes they'll have obituaries and photographs attached. But what I think is really critical about Find a Grave is that it allows you to, it creates that tree, but it allows you to kind of click through family members. And so you could start at Sadgwar's grave, but then you can see the grave of his wife, you can see the grave of his daughter, and you can kind of move through that way. And each of those sections may have additional articles attached to it. And the great thing is you can make an account just like Ancestry.com. Find a Grave is totally free, and you can keep track of who you're researching that way. When I use Find a Grave, I like to leave a virtual flower just as a sign of gratitude and to show that I've been there. And then sometimes I find myself sort of returning to those records again if I'm continuing to research, and I will see my little flower and I'll be like, oh, that's right, I've looked here before. All right, it's my favorite part. it's time to trawl the newspapers. So you have a couple options here, and this, I think, is where the really good stuff is. So Chronicling America, which is a massive archive run by the Library of Congress of digitized newspapers through 1963. Critically, all of these newspapers are text searchable. Newspapers.com is similar. It's through ancestry.com. So again, you're going to have to hopefully use your local library to find your way into ancestry.com, and then you can use that service. But an advanced search on Chronicling America allows you to choose the state you're looking in, create a year bracket, and then type in some search terms like the name of the person that you're hoping to search. You can search terms, any of the words, all the words, or a phrase. And let me tell you, you're going to get a lot of results. And so my advice would be to set aside some time to do this, because you're also hopefully going to learn some really interesting things. It's a great way to tease out little anecdotes or dramas. And so if you're doing historical research of any kind and you have some patience, you can find some really unique stuff and something that hasn't been written about or documented before. So as I said earlier, talking about cartoonists again, Luther Sadgor was a cartoonist himself, and he published in Washington, D.C. However, I said earlier that the newspapers are text searchable. What is not text searchable is an image like the one you see on your screen, which is the handwritten cartoon, is not text searchable. And that is where G. Luther Sadgor's pen name, which is Gadfly, is written. So a newspaper search of Gadfly did not get me what I wanted, which was an actual published image of one of his political cartoons, which were about Black men in America. And so what I was able to do is I used Chronicling America to find that he had been brought on in a small newspaper in Wisconsin, but only for a couple of years. So I went to that newspaper from Wisconsin. It was called the Wisconsin Blade. And I looked through every single page of every single newspaper for 2 years, which seems like a lot, but wasn't that bad. It was only published monthly, until I found this, which is his an actual cartoon of his. This is the only one I was able to find an image of, and I had to work for it, but it was worth it once I found it because I had taken the time. All right, next up. Finally, reach out to your local historical societies. Please come visit us. The DC History Center and other local historical societies could have city directories, which would give you the opportunity to trace people, properties, businesses over time. We have personal papers like the ones you've seen today, scrapbooks like the Sadgor scrapbooks, and yearbooks, which we also have in the Sadgor collection actually, and they give you a little glimpse into their life. And then honestly, take that opportunity to expand your search. What you're looking for might lead you to other characters, other questions, and they might reveal surprising connections between people, like the Berryman and Leon papers that we talked about earlier. Research is like a river. That's what I don't know, always say. Keep a hand on the tiller, but follow the current and let it guide you where you want to go. And just, I don't know, trust the process. But after that, I hope that you're feeling empowered to pursue your own research and interested in maybe a person in your family, maybe a person you heard of today. Please come and see us. And we're going to move on to the Q&A segment. And I know that you'll have a lot of specific questions about these people. And while I may not be able to answer all of them, I love questions about the research process. And I know our special guests waiting right off screen would love to talk about their experiences preparing for this program as well.
So Autumn, thank you so much for that. We've had some really, really fascinating questions in the Q&A, some of which we have answered. So I do hope people look back at answered questions as well. And I am loving that somebody jumped in and actually seemed to know our collection better than I did. And he found a resource that I didn't know about. So thank you so much. Please do chime in on the Q&A. Add your own experience. We really love it when researchers connect with each other and not just with us here at the DC History Center. So I'm going to, we have time for a couple of questions. And so the first one is going to be a little bit of a softball, and it is coming from Mark Jones. What's the first step for setting up a research appointment to learn more about using the DC History Center collections?
I would love to talk about, and I also want to say that Alex just went like this off screen. Yes, the first step is to send an email to library@dchistory.org. And before you do that, honestly, look at our catalog. That's going to be linked in the document that I'm sending over. And if you have an idea of the type of collections that you want to look at, our librarian Alex, you can talk to Alex. It's basically a consultation, and she'll be able to not only schedule your appointment, but make sure that when you come in, we have those materials ready for you, and maybe help you find things that you didn't know that we had.
This is perhaps a question for Alex, because it goes back to our Lady Evelyn. We've got a question about, where did she get the Hope Diamond?
Coming back.
Hi. Well, Evelyn was in Paris and she got it straight from Pierre Cartier. So it is possible. So the Hope Diamond comes from a rough stone that was about 112 carats. And at some point there was a very similar stone called the French Blue. It was never worn by Marie Antoinette, but it was worn by her husband, Louis. And then it disappeared upon the French Revolution. So then a few years later, it reappeared magically, and the man's last name was Hope, which is why it's called the Hope Diamond, and he sold it to Cartier. And so then Cartier gave Evelyn the hard sell. It was like, it's cursed, it's wicked, and she's like, I have to have it.
Absolutely, that sounds exactly like her.
Okay, let's see. We've got a great conversation going on between two researchers. One who is a retired professor in California researching the area of sport and recreation history. And we've got another person jumping in saying that they're working on a National Historic Register nomination on Anacostia Park. So they're sharing some resources back and forth is great. I'm actually going to jump in and say that Joel Franks, the article that I'm going to put in the chat is where I want you to start off. It is an article about the politics of play and the issue of segregated recreation facilities here in Washington, D.C. that delves into a lot of really, really thorny issues, and would sort of set the stage for a lot of the research that you might do on recreation sites here in D.C. I'm going to pop that into the Q&A to get you started. But then we do have lots of materials on Griffith Stadium and all the other venues here in DC as well. Okay, let's see. Do we have a precise address for Bessie Robinson's After Hours Club?
Ooh, I think I do. Give me 1 second.
All right, while you're looking that up, I am going to field another question, which, oh, this is great. We actually have a relative of somebody who has been featured chiming in, which is Brian Leo is saying that he's curious that at the top of the header of the email promoting this event, there's some photos of various people, including one of them, fourth from the left, is my mother. Can you tell me more about where the photo of her is from? And or a little bit about, you know, for those who are not related to the person, who this person was.
Okay, first of all, hi, Brian. We've corresponded a little bit. Okay, before I talk to Brian, let me answer the previous question, which is the location of Bessie Robinson's club. The club is 2024 15th Street Northwest, which I think is now possibly an apartment building or a block of apartment buildings. And so that's that information. I'm pulling up the banner so that I can look at it. But Brian, that photo of your mother, she was the first Miss Chinatown, Washington, D.C. And the photo comes from a collection that we have that is Chinatown, like photographic journal collections, which, Anne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that collection is from the opening of the City Museum exhibit. Is that correct?
Yes, there was an exhibit on Chinatown that was part of the City Museum, which was actually a project in this building from 2003 to 2004. And the part of the research material from that exhibit became part of our collections. Last question. I think we only have time for one more question. The fact that we didn't get to all of them does not mean that they won't be answered, because we have these questions and we will be able to reach out. If you do, we can reach out to you, or if you have additional questions, you can always send them into library@DC History and we'll make sure to answer them. But the last one that I was just going to highlight is A question about city directories. Are they available online and searchable?
What a great question. And do you know the answer to that? You know what, I might have to ask my librarian friend. She's here.
Hi again. Some of them are, not all of them are. We have them here, but as print documents, but we don't even have all of them. So it's a little bit of a toss up whether or not there's a couple of them digitized by Library of Congress. Yes.
So Hathi Trust and University of Pennsylvania have digitized a lot of them. We have a link in our Researching Building History Guide, which will pop into the chat. And that lists all of the physical copies. In fact, the city directories are right behind me, right up there on that shelf. The physical ones that we have, and then the ones that are digitized are linked as well. So that is available through and of course, as Betsy McDaniel's chiming in, yes, a lot of them that are digitized are available through Ancestry as well. So there are both free and paid ways to access the digital copies, and you can always make an appointment to come in to see the physical ones. And it is so awesome working with the physical analog city directories and not just the online ones. You end up discovering a lot of things that I think when you're looking online, you miss.
And hot tip, starting in 1919, the city directories have a reverse lookup, so you can look up an address and see who was there rather than just a name, which is.
Yeah, it does help. Also, there's advertisements in them. The physical copies are really cool. But I know that's our last question, so that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us behind the scenes and discovering these charismatic characters and collections with us today. I'd like to invite back Alex and Mariana and thank them. Philip had to run to the orientation for his next internship, which is at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Smithsonian. We're really excited for him, so sorry to not have him here, but it's because he is so deeply dedicated. But this was a hard program. There were a lot of moving parts, and I'm so grateful for my cast and for Anne, our camera woman and Q&A master, and for Marin Orchard, our senior manager of programs, who's been behind the scenes this whole time, making sure that this gets going. So thank you so much.
So you can email us with collections questions at collections@dchistory.org. And if this program has given you the itch to do some research, we hope that you'll come visit us here in the Kiplinger Research Library. You can email the DC History Center at library@dchistory.org to make an appointment. So we have a little bit of homework for you. Please do fill out our post-program survey asking for your feedback on this program. This was a bit of an experiment for us. So your feedback really, really does make a difference. We hope that you're going to join us for a future program. And the best way to keep tabs on programs of interest is to sign up for our newsletter and to follow us on social media. Finally, I just want to thank everyone who attended this program today. And a special thanks to those who donated at registration, because your support helps keep programs like this free and accessible. And in addition, DC History Center programs are supported by Events DC and the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. With that, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.